Welcome back to the mining channel. If you're new here, welcome. On today's video, we'll be building 3 cleanup sluices. These cleanup sluices were featured on one of Dan Hurds' videos back in 2022 when he visited my mine site. I have 3 buddies that mine in the Caribou close to me, and they want one of these cleanup sluices each. So what I'll do is I'll hammer out 3 of these and I'll show you the process and where I buy these items to build these units. So let's go to the scrapyard and dig this thing out of the snow. I've already taken the liberty of cutting all the bottom skids and getting that all prepped up. Another thing that I did was I took a day and spent the time and I cut everything to length that we need. To cut all these pieces, I just use a zip cut on a grinder. I didn't want to go and plasma cut these and clean up each edge, so this is a lot more accurate. For the frames, we use a 1.5 inch by 1.5 inch square stock. This is 1/8 wall. This will be plenty strong for what we need. These skids are exactly 4 feet by 4 feet square. I downsized it from the original just because this was a little bit larger and it barely fit in the back of a pickup truck. As I build these, I'll record only one of them. You'll see the other ones go up in the background, but there's no point in me recording the exact same thing over and over. During the building process, as I go along, I'll mention items that you'll need to build one of these for yourself. I'll also leave a link in the description below so you have easy access on where to buy it. With the base all squared up and leveled out, we can start with the uprights. I never go off of these magnets because they're just not accurate enough. So using a square is the way to go. For these crossbars, I want them sitting perfectly level. This is where the shaker deck will sit on with the springs. If the springs are at an angle, the shaker deck will have a tendency to want to go downhill. So we need to make it level this way so the springs sit straight up and down. The total screen deck length on these units are 36 inches in length. So we'll go from the outside of the bar to the outside of the bar and mark it at 36. So that's pretty much it for the main frame on these. Very simple, nothing too complicated. Just remember, these have to sit flat so the springs sit straight up and down. If you're wondering how I got all these angles just completely perfect everywhere, I just make up a template. That's my angle, just a break in it, and you can put it up anywhere. You can also use them to make sure your angles are good anywhere on the machine. The next piece that we'll build is the screen deck section. All these pieces are cut perfectly to length with the proper angles. I think what I'll do is actually build it sitting on this frame. My workbench isn't quite wide enough, so this will do. So we have the screen deck frame all tacked together. This is where the vibration motor mounts. We still have to make a plate, drill some holes, and mount the vibrating motor. With all the framing done, we can start on some of the sheet metal. We'll start with the hopper. I have the piece cut out already, all my angles. So we'll get that in the metal brake and bend it up. So as I'm going along building these, I'm slightly changing my original design on the stuff that I didn't like about it. This hopper is quite a bit larger and has a steeper angle to it. This original hopper was an auger drive. I took the auger drive out because I couldn't find a slow enough and more powerful enough motor to spin it to let the material go through. A lot of times with gold mining, simple is better. So this piece here is for the lower catch basin underneath the screen deck. These are super hard to make in one piece, so if you're gonna tackle this, make it in multiple pieces and just weld it up. There's a lot of different angles on this. That's square, that's not square, that's not square, and then all these extra flares just add complications to it all. Now let's go stick it in the brake and bend her up. All right, so there's the lower catch basin. Like I said, this thing is really complicated. A guy doesn't need to go like this. It's just the way I have it. You can see this angles this way, this side angles that way, and it meets at the output for the fine sluice box. Now to make the junction from the hopper onto the screen deck, I'm just gonna put the screen deck back on, shim it to where it needs to be, and then we can start capping the hopper off. This is just a 1 inch by 1 inch square tubing. For the nugget trough, I already cut and bent this piece up. This is a little bit tricky also. Once again, you could build it in multiple pieces. All right, the nugget flume is all tacked in. So as the material comes over the screen deck, fines will fall on this side, coarse will fall on that side. Now, let's tackle this chute. Okay, let's get back onto the screen deck. So these are the springs that I use for these screen decks. These are actually from an Allis-Chalmers dozer. They are a little bit hard to find. My other screen deck was built from a 3T cat dozer, but in the end, I think you could actually use just a small block Chev valve spring. These are the perches that I whipped up for it. The valve spring just sits on there and cups it like that. Also, a bolt is tacked onto the frame so that valve spring can sit right in there. And then that just butts up straight like that. There, that screen deck is now floating on springs. With the screen deck on the springs, we can now start boxing in lots of these areas where water can actually get out. Okay, now we can put the punch plate in on the screen deck. Okay, that's all tacked in now. This punch plate is 1/8 of an inch thick and has 3/16 holes. This is what you call a 50% open punch plate. This punch plate is what you call a 50% open. That means that it has 50% openness of the entire surface area. To mount the shaker motor, I just cut out a 3/8 plate, drilled some holes. I already have this measured and marked out, so we can weld this on now. These are the shaker motors that I use for these screen decks. These are made for concrete vibration. This is a 50 watt with an upgraded weight system to give it a little bit more shake. For these 3 screen decks, I actually ordered the 100 watt ones. They're around $200 from Amazon. They didn't show up in time for this video, so I just robbed the 50 watt one from my old screen decks so you guys can see the vibration that they give. They are 120 volt systems, so you do need a generator on site to run them. So these are actually a high frequency. They spin around 2,750 RPM. You can barely even see any vibration on the unit. But as soon as you throw some rocks on it, they are very durable and waterproof. I let mine sit outside for the last 3 years and I haven't had any issues. Let's take a quick break from building those cleanup sluices and see what kind of gold I left in this. I'm sort of curious, I've actually never pulled these ripples out, so there might be some nuggets stuck in all the crevices. So I'll be using my La Trappe pan. I like these things for finishing. I dumped half of the material into that pan just because that was a lot of material in this one. I like these things for finishing just because of the large flat surface. So let's start panning this out. Okay, we can dump the rest of the material in now. The one downside to using these pans is they're a little bit awkward. This is a small thumb holder right there, but a lot of weight on it, your thumb gets sore. So I usually grab them from both sides. It doesn't help either that this pan is just a little bit too wide for this tub. All right, so there's actually a decent amount of gold in this. I thought I had this thing picked through pretty good, but obviously not. Let's see if I can, I've never done this on camera, so. So not a whole lot of fine gold is making it to that side, so obviously that shaker deck is doing its job. Gotta be a couple grams worth of little pickers there. So I just switched it to my phone because the GoPro doesn't do close-ups. Look at that, that's pretty decent. So next up, I want to do this bottom tray. This top tray is really cleaned out, so there's no point in tackling it. So this is just a 4-pound expanded over miner's moss. There's going to be a lot of material in it, so it's going to take a little while to pan out. Okay, so I put some new water in it just so it's not muddy for us. I just pulled this stuff out of the mats dry, so it's got to get her wet. I'm actually going to move to the floor. This is just way too awkward. I never pan at home. I always do my clean outs at the site. Okay, we're gonna move to the sink to finish this off. This water's a little bit dirty. My jet dry is frozen from being in my camper. All right, so you're not gonna believe this, but there's really not much gold in this. I'm super surprised. I was thinking around half of an ounce maybe down there, but I bet you there's less than a couple grams. Let's add the pickers to it. Then I'll just use a torch and burn the water off. Good enough. So let's zero this guy out with our piece of paper on there. Dump our gold on. And then put it back on. 3.68 grams. I don't know if this goes, oh yeah, the GoPro does pick it up. Sure, it's a little bit blurry, but cool. Very cool. Some of those pickers are pretty nice. So what I'm gonna do with this gold is actually give it to one of my subscribers. Make sure you give this video a thumbs up and comment below, and I'll pick a random comment and send this gold to the winner. Now that's enough, let's get back on these cleanup sluices. Okay, let's get on to the sluice boxes. So I've got the mounts cut out already. We'll use a square and weld these on. These top mounts are fixed just because this angle doesn't have to change at all. For this side, we want it adjustable. So I just cut out some 2.5-inch piping, cut it in half like that, cap it over top, and weld it up. Okay, the mounts are all done. The good thing about having 2 bolts on these perches versus just one to tighten it is you can actually adjust the angle of the perch. So with that all done, let's build up some sluice boxes. These sluice boxes just literally slide on. That's the bottom one. And this is the top one. Just like that. I built these sluice boxes from an 18-gauge satin coated steel. You could build them from aluminum. Doesn't really make a difference. We're not trying to pack these into the bush. The matting that I use for these cleanup systems is a Devon Gold drop riffle sluice. I just built a 1/2-inch kick up to have a smooth transition. These are rubber mats, so what we'll do is actually take some contact cement and glue them in, and then caulk the edges. Usually these mats you pull out and wash out, but the way I have this designed is when you glue it in, you can take that tray out, tilt it on its side, and wash all the gold out the end into a bucket. I purchased these mats from a prospecting business just located outside of Quesnel up towards Barkerville. They're called D&E Prospecting. They're really good people. If you have a chance, stop by and say hi. So these mats are around $360 a piece. They're not necessarily cheap, but they do work well. Any gold that makes it over the vortex matting will drop over into a 4-pound expanded over miner's moss. I'm not gonna put it in just yet. All my miner's moss and expanded is buried outside in like a couple feet of snow. For the nugget side, it just goes over top of a V-rib matting and a Hungarian style riffle. Lots of times the nuggets will just sit right there. Occasionally you'll see a couple sit there, but usually nothing makes it down to the bottom. So with the sluice boxes all done, let's make our bucket lift system. We'll just copy this design, it works well. There's one thing I'm going to change from my original design, and that's how far this bucket sits out. Currently right now I end up with a little bit of material and water that builds up there, so I'm just gonna shorten this frame up so the bucket sits out probably about 1/2 inch from this bar. So our bucket dumper's all done. These things are super handy. You just chuck the bucket up on there, lift it up into any position. Just like that. From there you can just feed the material in. You can pile up a full bucket in this hopper. Here you can see the little notches that I put in for the different adjustment. That's just a pivot up there, and then that just slides down to wherever you need it. The last thing that we have to do for the shaker deck is build the spray bar system. I'm just gonna copy this exact same design. It works really well. We have a 2-inch gate valve here, some more valving to clean out the sluice boxes, and then it's just a 2-inch inlet. The other hose goes up into the hopper to control the feed rate into the shaker unit. For the spray bars, we'll be using a black ABS in all these pipe fittings. Believe it or not, all these fittings and that pipe costed almost $500. It actually would have been cheaper to build this out of steel. I have our list of measurements for this piping. Let's start cutting this stuff up. So I'll just be dry fitting all this stuff at first, and then I'll glue it later on. There are 3 pieces that I don't glue, just so you can take them out and clean out the spray nozzle. So that's it for the spray bar system. This is just a dry fit. Now I can glue it together. The nugget sluice side, I just drill a 1.5-inch hole. I don't glue this in just in case a guy needs to swap it out and adjust the flow from side to side. For the screen deck spray nozzles, I just drilled a bunch of 1/4-inch holes. I keep these removable just because you can see it does fill up with pebbles and rocks. You can poke them out, drain them, good to go. And then to mount the piping to the frame, I just used this strapping. Wrap it around, a couple sheet metal screws, and that'll hold it really sturdy. So that's 3 screen decks built in 2 weeks. That was a heck of a lot of work. I'm absolutely exhausted, and I still have to make this video tomorrow, so it's out on Saturday. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode. It was short, but I was so busy building these screen decks, I didn't get much filming done, but in the end, you don't need to know much more on how to build these yourself. I'm really itching to get out to the mine site and start digging some dirt. I still have 2 small projects to go, but they'll be quick. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this episode. We'll see you on the next one.